Honourable members, the Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Wentworth.
Deputy Speaker, it was my great honour to recently attend the opening of Tamarama Surf Lifesaving Club's new clubhouse. Since its inception in 1900s, Tamarama has been a little club with a big heart, which makes an even bigger contribution to our community, as well as running patrols, rescues and preventative actions, where incidentally no life has been lost for over 100 years. The club has a dedicated education team, competitions and programs, including first aid courses and the Bronze Medallion program. I'm also proud to say that the club has led its way on inclusivity. Its members are active participants in Lifesavers with Pride and the Rainbow Beaches program, and they have individual scholarships for members of the Aboriginal community and the migrant community. Truly, this is a club where everyone belongs. And not only is their new clubhouse a stunning building with breathtaking views and even better facilities, it's also running on renewable energy. I'd like to thank all of those who have helped make these renovations a possibility, including Waverley Council, the New South Wales Government and the previous federal member. And I'd like to congratulate in particular Mateo, the departing club president, as well as all the staff, volunteers and the wider Tamarama network. You have all worked tirelessly to achieve this wonderful milestone. I know it has taken a lot of energy and patience, and I hope that you continue to enjoy your beautiful new home. Thank you for everything you do for our community. Deputy Speaker, over the last few weeks, it's also been my pleasure to see new life members of our surf lifesaving clubs across Wentworth being admitted. These people have made an enormous impact on our community, and it's due to their hard work and the service that the clubs in my community are the thriving community hubs they are today. I'd like to congratulate in particular the following individuals for their years of service. From Bronte Surf Lifesaving Club, Gabby Nair and Tony Coates. Gabby was inducted as their third female life member, and Tony has played a significant role in the club over many decades. From Bondi Surf Lifesaving Club, Kieran Milne, who I saw inducted just the other weekend. Bondi has also announced a new scholarship for young members in memory of Louise Santos, an honorary life member who sadly passed away last year. North Bondi Surf Lifesaving Club welcomed their current president, Steve Bluey Larnack, as a life member, as well as two 70-year members, Max Sayer and Ken Hisso, MBE. Clovelly Lifesaving Club welcomed Jane Featon as their first female life member. Jan was Clovelly's first female president in the late 1990s, and she has been a huge influence on many women in the club today. And from Tamarama Surf Lifesaving Club, Mateo Salvo, the immediate past president, and Tom Bodger. I'm so proud to represent these coastal communities and to work alongside our lifesaving clubs.
I call the member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. You probably don't know this, but the member for Bennelong is also referred to often as the member for Pill Hill. It's a name born from the number of pharmaceutical and medtech businesses that are established in Bennelong and Macquarie Park. But I also think it reflects the way our community is leading the way in embracing innovative medical technology and fostering a culture of health and well-being. And I just wanted to reflect on some of the great health-focused events that I've had the pleasure to take part in over the winter break. A standout event was the Edwards Life Sciences Patient Experience Day, which brought together 12 patients, their loved ones, patient organisations and 120 local employees. This gathering, the second largest of its kind globally for Edward Life Sciences, highlighted the profound impact of medical technology on patients who have had to deal with heart health. The day was filled with inspiring stories, particularly that of the current New South Wales Health Secretary's Susan Pearce. She shared a story where she experienced her heart murmur and was saved because of this incredible technology. We also heard Lachlan Dryer's journey through multiple heart surgeries to be a success in rugby league. The dedication of everyone present to addressing structural heart disease was clearly evident, showcasing ongoing efforts to enhance their quality of life, and hearing their personal stories was truly moving. Soon after that, I had the privilege of hosting the Minister for Health in Bennelong, where we toured some of our local health providers. Our visit began at the Midway Family Pharmacy, a cornerstone of our community's healthcare. We explored their role in the National Immunisation Program, which has significantly boosted vaccination rates by providing free vaccines directly through pharmacies in our community. This initiative has improved accessibility, but has also reduced pressure on our local GP clinics. We also talked about the government's cheaper medicines policy and also workforce issues within the sector. I thank Tao and her team for giving us a moment in their busy day to provide feedback. Our discussions continued at the Maxim Street Health Hub in West Ryde, where we engaged with local doctors on our plan to strengthen Medicare. The doctors shared valuable insights on the local implementation of these programs and the tangible benefits they observed, the tripling of the bulk billing initiative and also the rollout of our urgent care clinic were discussed. Our constant theme emerged throughout our visit, and that was the importance of listening to those directly involved in healthcare delivery when trying to strengthen Medicare. After 10 years of cuts and neglect to our primary healthcare system, it is finally turning around. We're seeing green shoots in bulk billing rates, and pharmacists are working towards a greater scope of practice. Both of those are good things, and I thank the Minister for his time and visit. I'm optimistic about the healthcare future we're helping create.
I call the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Internet and phone services are not just conveniences, they're vital lifelines. But here in Australia, we're falling woefully short of the standards we should expect in a wealthy, developed nation. It's a tragedy of the making of both major parties. Ultimately, full fibre broadband should have been rolled out smoothly at world standard by a publicly owned Telstra. But Labor's privatisation of Telstra in the 90s deprived the government of the logical vehicle to deliver a national broadband network. It also meant that it had to negotiate with corporate behemoth Telstra to deliver the NBN, which effectively led to enormous cost blowouts and time wasted. Meanwhile, Labor's addiction to corporatisation also led them to set up the NBN as a public corporation that had to turn a profit early in the rollout, causing higher prices for consumers and poorly targeted rollout priorities. Then, in 2013, the LNP government gutted the plan even further, slashed the funding and went for a multi-technology mix that included the infamous fibre to the node and lesser-known hybrid fibre coaxial, or HFC, an old Foxtel network not remotely fit for purpose. The NBN has recently launched a round of upgrades across the country, but I'm afraid it's a lottery for many. If your home is stuck with an HFC connection, you're out of luck on an upgrade. Take the Gap or Mitchelton, both suburbs in my electorate of Ryan. Most people have an HFC connection, and in our recent survey about this, we discovered that many people experience frequent dropouts, especially in the rain, and low speeds, or just completely unstable connections. The UK and the USA know HFC is bad news. That's why they're looking at upgrading their whole network to the international standard, which is fibre to the premise. My survey revealed the shocking state of our telecommunications in Ryan. Over 50% of respondents reported slow, unreliable and overpriced mobile service. For home internet, it was even worse. More than 60% said they had issues. A shocking 70% reported frequent dropouts, with some suffering for days or even a week without resolution. It's incredibly frustrating for many residents in suburbs like Kenmore, Bellbowrie or the Gap, who have to take calls in the backyard because of poor reception. Meanwhile, everyday Australians struggle to get their work done, help their kids with homework, or even just watch a movie. Telecom CEOs are raking in millions. Telstra's Vicky Brady, $5.25 million. Optus CEO Kelly Bayer Rosmarin, over $5 million. And NBN CEO Stephen Rue, $3 million. Labor and the LNP's corporate model for crucial infrastructure and services has failed. It's time to ditch
expired.
it. Thank you.
I call the Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury and Employment.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Most of our Olympians are coming home today, and with them 53 medals, the best medal tally for Australia since the Sydney Games. There's been some remarkable stories over in Paris. 43-year-old basketballer Lauren Jackson earning her 5th Olympic medal, cyclist Matthew Gleitzer, who lost 4 bronze medal races in the past 4 Olympics, beating thyroid cancer and finally getting an Olympic medal in Paris. Jessica Hull becoming the first Australian woman to claim a medal in the 1500 and propelling the athletics team to its best result since Melbourne in 1956. We saw Saya Sakabara, the BMX gold medal winner, with an emotional tribute to her brother Kai. And Jess Fox taking home 6 individual medals in total over her various games, and now seeing her sister Naomi win in the first ever kayak cross event. The Fox family in itself would have ranked 29th on the medal table. Kayak cross was supported by the Albanese government's $20 million Paris preparation fund. And then we had 14-year-old skateboarding gold medalist Arissa True, who only said to her parents that she would like a pet duck. For Canberrans, the success of Australia at the Olympics was a special source of pride because of the work that the Australian Institute of Sport has done in preparing so many of our Olympians. In gymnastics, we've seen the AIS campus play an instrumental role in preparing our team for the Games. Team leader Georgia Goodwin trained on site before injury cruelled her Olympic chances. Shane Rose, an equestrian, used the AIS facilities in order to help recover over a transformative 4-week period with the help of AIS physios and trainers. In canoeing, the men's K4 spent time in their boat training in the AIS pool in Canberra, with Paddle Australia and the AIS biomechanics and engineers teaming up to help them find the crucial milliseconds during the race start they needed. Bronte Campbell, a swimmer, relocated to Canberra in her successful tilt to become a 4-time Olympian. And the majority of Australian basketball players have come through the AIS as part of Basketball Australia's Centre for Excellence. It demonstrates why the Albanese government was right to invest $250 million in the AIS in Bruce, ensuring those facilities are fit for purpose, expanding accommodation and investing in Australia's success in the upcoming Los Angeles and Brisbane Games.
I call the member for Groom.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I've spoken many times in this place on the youth crime crisis that's been running through Queensland, and sadly Toowoomba has borne the brunt of that crisis far too often. We've seen it in repeated car thefts, the sight of burnt-out cars on the side of the road, particularly going out to Woki, is just a common sight. We've had break-ins across the country. There's not a street that I've door-knocked that can't point to the houses that have been affected by this. We've seen, sadly, far too many of these break-ins escalate into assaults, and that culminated, sadly for many people, in the death of Robert Brown in broad daylight, committed by youth criminals. This has been something that has plagued our city. But there's something about the desecration of the Toowoomba Drayton Cemetery that happened just over the weekend that is really, it's really just hit people, because this is just the most senseless act that young criminals could perpetrate on a community. And it's just shocking. This is one of Queensland's oldest cemeteries. It keeps the records of Toowoomba's forefathers, people who came here and created this wonderful city of ours. Over 100 graves and memorials, including war graves, have been knocked over and destroyed. Over estimated $500,000 damage. And what hurts is that already, just 2 days after, we've found there'll be no court appearance for the 3 young people who committed these acts, no community service, just a caution. Just a caution. There is absolutely no deterrent in Queensland for young people committing these horrific crimes. And, Speaker, this just does not meet community standards. This is not good enough. The message out of this intolerable act is that you can do this and get away with it. How did we get here? Because Queensland Labor watered down the Youth Justice Act. And that has been the cause of so much harm and just hurt amongst communities because they did that. How are we going to fix it? Labor have had absolutely no response to this. Haven't even responded to this. The LNP have been very clear with their adult crime, adult time policy. They will address it, and I commend local member David Janeski. But, Speaker, you know, there was a Safer Communities Fund that our side of the House brought out, which would have exactly been helpful in a situation like this. I'd love to be able to offer this to the Toowoomba Council right now. You know, this was a fund directly towards CCTV, towards gates, toward making communities safer. Why the government knocked that back, I have absolutely no idea. It's an absolute disgrace. I should be able to reach out and offer to that my community at this time.
I call the member for Tangney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recently visited Good Start Canning Vale in my electorates of Tangney. The team of early learning professional strives to provide the best care for every child. This early childhood education and care setting also reflect the diversity of Tangney. 19 different languages are spoken at the centre, and the educators work hard to promote cultural awareness and understanding. In speaking some of the many languages of Tangney, all under one roof, the educator promote multiculturalism and harmony daily. The team of 28 early childhood educators have formed relationship with local businesses and community organizations to ensure that they are inclusive to all families. For example, using a local butcher to provide halal meals. They are welcoming to all families and they shape and change lives. Early childhood educators have one of the most important jobs. The Albanese Labour government's 15% pay rise for early childhood educators will make a real difference to all the highly skilled professionals who care, nurture, and educate our youngest Australians. This wage increase will phase into 2 years. A 10% increase from December 2024 and a further 5% increase from December 2025. A typical EC educator who is paid at award rate will receive a pay rise of at least $103 per week, and it will increase to $155 per week in 2025. At a Good Start Canning Vale, I saw the relationship created between the educators and every child. And I saw the trust between the families and the educators. This relationship can be seen in early childhood setting across all in Tangney. I see it as a grandfather. My grandson has grown up so much since he started attending the early childhood education and care. He was only 1 year, now he's 1.5 years old. He has become more cheerful, more confident, more active, and of course, more cheeky. As a proud grandfather, I'm impressed by everything he has learned since he started his early childhood education. This is in a large part due to all the hard work of the incredible all the educators have done. The Albanese Labour government's cheaper childcare policy have helped many families in Tangney with increased subsidies. These changes have made early childhood education and care more affordable. And now this long-deserved wage increase will help all the early childhood educators in the nation. Thank you to all the early childhood educators at Good Start Canning Vale for showing me the important work that you do. Thank you.
I call the member for Page.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate the Australian Red Cross on their 110 years of service, including foundation branches, of which in my community are the Alstonville and Waddell branches. The Alstonville Red Cross branch was one of the founding branches that have supported local and overseas projects throughout their time. I'd like to thank and acknowledge all members of the Alstonville branch, including the current President Colleen Schultz, Secretary Carol Lasky, Treasurer Marilyn Keevers and Patron Joy Wicks. And in acknowledging this executive, I'm acknowledging the executive over the last 110 years and all the members over the past 110 years. The Waddell Red Cross branch began a week after World War I was declared, with 105 locals quickly joining. They began with a cutting out committee where clothes were made and sent to frontline soldiers. Continuing these fundraising activities 110 years on, the branch has raised over $40,000 for many appeals, drought, bushfires, defibrillator, as well as overseas support in Nepal, Myanmar and Fiji and Indonesia. Again, I thank and congratulate the current executive, President Ginny Spears, Vice Presidents Ros Walsh and Jeanette Henwood, Treasurer Paddy Goff and Secretary James Sproul. And in acknowledging the current executive, I'm acknowledging the executive and the members for the last 110 years. Congratulations to both these branches. I'd also like to extend this to the Red Cross branches in my electorate on their varying lengths of services, including Casino Doubtful Creek, Jigai Georgica, Kyogle, Lismore, the Lower Clarence, Woolgoolga, Yamba and Tuckarimba. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge and thank John Gorey from Grafton, who has had 55 years of service in the soccer community. John began refereeing in 1972 at 33 years of age in the Grafton area, and over the following 55 years, John has refereed, coached and held administrative roles for many competitions. John is still refereeing every Saturday for the Majos Grafton Soccer Club, where he is a life member, motivating younger players, providing everyone with his incredible knowledge. John is highly respected by the Grafton soccer community. Some of his achievements include refereeing in the 1996 World Fun Cup for the Super Oldies at the Gold Coast, helping in the foundation of the Majos Grafton Soccer Club, where he's still active, and refereeing the North Coast and Far North Coast Premier League. I thank John, acknowledge John for his highly decorated and respected career in the world of soccer, and thank him for the contributions to the soccer community. I also know his family, John's wife Faye, children John, Marie, Paul and Mark, are very proud of him.
I call the member for Swan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Over the winter break, I spent a lot of time in the amazing electorate of Swan, from speaking to people at the farmers' markets, to chatting to people at shops, to door knocking on people's doors. And one thing is crystal clear, that the cost of living is the #1 concern for my community. And this is also the number one priority for the Albanese Labor government. But it's also the top priority for the WA Cook Labor government. And that's why together we're working to provide energy relief for every household. And so what this means is that in a partnership with the WA and the federal government, 84,000 households in Swan will be getting $700 off their electricity bills. So people have started seeing $350 off their July bill, and the next instalment will come in December. But that's just one part of one big picture. Labor is working across the board to ease the pressure on workers, families, pensioners and students. Under Labor, real wages have gone up for the third quarter consecutively in a row. In the June quarter, we saw wages increase by 0.8%, bringing an annual growth of 4.1%. Nominal wages have consistently grown by at least 4% over the last 4 quarters, something that did not happen under the Coalition. It never happened. And this is because we are deliberately wanting to help people earn more. But not only are we wanting to help people earn more, we also want to make sure that they're keeping more of what they earn. Our July tax cuts have helped 94,000 people in Swan. 81% of taxpayers in Swan are receiving a bigger tax cut than what they would have under the Liberal government. And let's not forget, in WA, 1.2 million people will get a bigger tax cut because of Labor, and 600,000 of them are women. Women are also critical workers who make up the majority of the childcare workforce. And thanks to Labor, they are set to receive an overdue, well-earned 15% pay rise over the next 2 years. I'd like to pay tribute to Senator Billick, who shared that she is an experienced childhood educator, and this is something that has been fought hard for over the last 40 years. As a working mother, I know that the childhood educators at my daughter's childcare centre are worth their weight in gold. We're also introducing legislation to wipe out $3 million of student debt for over 3 million Australians, 22,000 of them right in Swan, many of them studying at Curtin University, where Labor delivered more extra university places. We're working hard every day.
Call the member for Mitchell.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to highlight and condemn the terrible scenes that we've watched unfold in Bangladesh over recent weeks on behalf of Australia's Bangladeshi community. The nation, rich in culture and resilience, is facing substantial challenges. Beneath its vibrant surface, Bangladesh is grappling with complex issues that do deserve Australia's thoughtful consideration and action. It's incredibly distressing whenever we see governments use force against their own citizens, especially those who are attempting nothing more than peaceful protest about the decisions of government or a court system. And the clashes between the people and the government have resulted in dozens of deaths of young university students and hundreds of injured people. I've got a strong association with the Bangladeshi diaspora in Australia, and I want to extend to them my thoughts and concern, and obviously our advocacy for an open and democratic society in Bangladesh. I want to thank all the members of the community that have written to me extensively about the issue and have kept us up to date as parliamentarians about developments in the country. They're understandably fearful for the lives of their family and their friends that live in Bangladesh, and the distance from Bangladesh makes this very, very difficult. It was made all the more difficult by the distress at seeing government shut down the internet, and modern societies can be terrifying in that the government can shut down a single organ of communication and thereby control their citizenry. It's something we have to watch here as a free and open democracy, but the government decision has cut off citizens from their fellow country people and from external care and thought. That's why I think it's important that the principles of democracy that Australia represents need to be stood up for in our region. We encourage, of course, peaceful resolution of these issues. We encourage the government to engage with its citizens in open dialogue, not to shut down or censor or persecute those that seek peaceful protest. We are fortunate to live in a democracy where these rights have been traditionally respected and upheld, and it's something we need to continue to fight for. We also need to continue as a parliament to call out those governments in our region that do not do the right thing by their own populations and certainly erode freedom and democracy in our region. This situation serves as a stark reminder of the need for our powerful advocacy as a country. We are respected in our region, we are respected in the international community, and we do have a strong voice, and I encourage the government to use that voice here in relation to what is happening in Bangladesh. As Bangladesh moves forward, especially in the wake of the ousting of Sheikh Hasina, it's imperative that the country rebuilds with the tenets of democracy at its fore. It's something that we would welcome. Every voice amongst the Bangladeshi people deserves to be heard without fear of retribution, and I know Australia does, and the entire Parliament would strongly condemn all of the violence that we've seen, especially government violence, does call on all parties involved to work urgently towards a peaceful solution with the principles of democracy in mind.
Call the member for Patterson.
Thanks, Deputy Chair. We've all had a fantastic couple of weeks watching the Olympics, but where do these athletes come from? Well, they come from places like the Maitland Mustangs, from Maitland Basketball, and I'd like to thank people like Amy McGregor, Trent Williams, their coach, Luke Boyle, team manager, Michelle, and I want to send a special shout out to the development manager, Dan Howard. Dan, you are doing an incredible job. You have created opportunities for students in regional schools to access, learn and play basketball for free and often for the very first time, avoiding them having to travel long distances to sporting centres. Dan recognised that regional schools needed a basketball program, and he decided to make a difference. Together with the Maitland Mustangs senior teams, who I might just say have recently become the champions of NBL 1, Go Team, Mighty Mustangs, he travelled to regional schools, providing fun, free basketball classes in those schools. Now over 500 children have been granted these opportunities, all thanks to Dan, whose commitment to growing the next generation of basketball players and fans is really remarkable. Programs like these are so important to delivering healthy outcomes and opportunities for everyone, not just those who can afford it. And who knows, we may see these kids play at the Brisbane 32 Olympics, playing for the Opals or the Boomers. I recently had the privilege of catching up with Dan and the Mustangs team to check out their new IT equipment they purchased through volunteer grant funding that I was able to help them secure. Dan is humble, kind and generous. He's such a great guy. He goes the extra mile for our young people to advocate for his beloved sport and to coach for the New South Wales basketball. I want to thank you, Dan, for your tireless commitment, not only to your beloved basketball, but also to those kids who just are going to get so much out of it. I'd also like to congratulate Warramai Land Council and their CEO, Andrew Smith, for winning the Visitor Attraction Award at the Innovate Asia Pacific Awards in 2024 in Bangkok. This is an international award. It's an extraordinary achievement for Warramai. If you haven't had a chance to go to Maruk, their centre, it is a place not only of learning but of intentional spirituality and a place that is just remarkable. Do yourself a favour and go and visit there. They extend 60,000 years of knowledge and hospitality to us all, and I congratulate them and thank them for that deeply.
In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 1. Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024. Resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So as part of a comprehensive range of measures the Albanese Labor Government is putting in place to combat scammers, we are also establishing the SMS Sender ID Registry. This bill will require the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the ACMA, to establish and maintain a register of legitimate sender IDs. So instead of having to hunt down and eliminate all the fake scammer SMS sources, we will instead establish a register of those that have been authenticated as legitimate. It will establish an industry standard for telecommunications providers who manage SMS traffic. The standard will require telcos who manage SMS traffic to check the SMS that use sender IDs to ascertain whether a sender ID is on the register and whether the sender is the registered party. If not, the telco could be required to block or tag the SMS as fraudulent. Once operating, the register will decrease the frequency and impact of SMS impersonation scams on consumers. So it's good for consumers, but it's also good for businesses. The operation of the register will also increase protections for legitimate brands and agencies against bad actors impersonating them. I know I've been late paying a bill because I thought the messages I was receiving were from scammers. The Sender ID Registry will disrupt the business models for SMS impersonation scams. The register will boost public confidence in SMS as a communications channel. The operation of the register will ultimately make Australia and Australians a harder target for scam activity. But the Albanese government is not naive in thinking the register will provide a silver bullet against all future SMS impersonation scams. Unfortunately, we know that scammers will invariably change tactics and use new methods to contact and ensnare would-be victims. This is why the bill has inbuilt provisions to allow us to respond quickly too. The bill provides the Minister for Communications to make determinations in future by way of legislative instruments which will respond to the changing scam landscape. This will allow the Minister to determine if there are future communications services as other than SMS and MMS which may use sender identifications in the future. The Minister can determine if there is something other than letters, numbers, symbols which may be included in sender identifications in the future. And the Minister can determine if there is an additional relevant information that should be kept on the register in future. The Telecommunication Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill, the SMS Sender ID Register Bill, marks an important step in the Albanese government's multi-pronged approach to combating SMS scams. The May 2023 budget provided $86.5 million over 4 years to address scams and help keep Australians safe. This funding established the National Anti-Scam Centre in the ACCC from July 2023, an innovative, world-leading public-private sector partnership to disrupt and stop scammers in Australia. There has been a national campaign by the National Anti-Scam Centre to show Australians how to identify and protect themselves from scams. And we've had the Assistant Treasurer in Boothby to run a very popular anti-scams forum, and I've spoken at a number of groups about how to protect themselves from scams. In May 2024, through its Fighting Scams initiative measure, the Albanese government has committed a further $67.5 million over 4 years, from 2024 to 25, to combat scams and protect Australians from financial harm. This funding will further support the introduction of mandatory industry codes, which requires all telecommunications providers, banks and digital platforms to identify, trace and block phone and SMS scams. These code rules have resulted in over 1.9 billion scam calls and 533 million scam texts being blocked to the end of March 2024 already. Deputy Speaker, scammers are increasingly, sadly, a part of our modern lives. We have previously been playing catch-up, trying to identify and block scammers, and this has been a losing game. The faster we catch them, the faster they set up on a new phone number, a new site, a new business model. This bill aims to help Australians to take control and keep themselves safe by maintaining a register of trusted and verified numbers. I commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities, Treasury and Employment.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's a sad fact that for many Australians, when a text message comes in, it's not a message from a friend or a family member, but instead it can often be a scam. Common SMS scams include fake order deliveries, refund scams, scams that suggest you've won a prize, scams that say there's an issue with your payments, impersonation of government websites, and impersonation of well-known businesses such as Coles or Linked. This bill is an important step in the Albanese government's multi-pronged approach to combating SMS scams. It complements rules registered by the Australian Communications and Media Authority, which has seen over 500 million scam texts stopped between the middle of 2022 and March of this year. The register also complements the Albanese government's establishment of a national anti-scam centre as a world-leading public-private sector partnership to disrupt and stop scam activities, and the introduction of a scams code framework that requires telcos, banks and digital platforms to prevent, detect and disrupt scams. The scams targeted by this bill are fake text messages sent using a sender identification system which makes it look like a well-known company or brand. That can make it more likely that recipients of those text messages are deceived and more likely that they lose money as a result of this insidious scam activity. The SMS Sender ID Register Bill will require the Australian Communications and Media Authority to establish and maintain a register of legitimate sender IDs and engage a contracted provider to partially or wholly maintain the register. The bill allows for a voluntary or a mandatory register. An industry standard for telecommunications providers who manage SMS traffic will also be made by the Australian Communications and Media Authority. The standard will require telecommunications providers who manage SMS traffic to check SMSs that use sender IDs to ascertain whether a sender is on the register and whether the sender is the registered party. If not, the telco could be required to block or tag the SMS as fraudulent. Once it's fully established, legitimate businesses will be able to have their sender IDs placed on the register, which will decrease the frequency and impact of SMS impersonation scams and ensure better protections for legitimate brands. One of the problems of scams is that Australians are increasingly ignoring text messages from businesses, some of which are legitimate, for fear that they're receiving a scam message. This register will boost public confidence in text messages as a communications channel. The Albanese government knows that this isn't the only piece of tackling SMS impersonation scams. We know scammers will change tactics. We know they'll use new methods to contact and ensnare would-be victims. And so that's why the bill has inbuilt protections to allow the Minister for Communications to make determinations by way of legislative instrument which respond to a changing scam landscape. That might include future communications services other than SMS and MMS, which might use sender identifications in the future. It might include a thing other than letters, numbers and symbols that might be included in sender identifications in the future. And it might include relevant additional information to accepted sender identifications that should be kept on the register in the future. This bill allows the ACMA to make determinations by a legislative instrument, setting out further requirements for access on the register. We understand that scammers are using technology very rapidly, that artificial intelligence is allowing pernicious, tailored scams which will specifically target vulnerable people, sometimes using personal information about them scraped from the web. Allowing the legislation and the register to keep up with this sort of pernicious activity will be critical. The Albanese government has committed $67 million over 4 years, starting from 2024-25, to combat scams. That supports measures such as the introduction of mandatory industry codes, the Australian Communication and Media Authority's work in enforcing compliance with the telecommunications industry's anti-scam code, and a campaign by the National Anti-Scam Centre to identify as to how people can identify scams and protect themselves from scams. That's in addition to the $86 million over 4 years provided in last year's budget, which included funding to establish the National Anti-Scam Centre. Telecommunications providers need to do more. I was troubled to speak to somebody from a major telecommunications provider recently who said that the reason that you'll sometimes receive more scam text messages at night time is that their people aren't working 24 hours. That needs to change. If these carriers are serious about disrupting scams, they need to be as vigilant against scam technologies sent at 12 a.m. as they are at messages sent at 12 p.m. We are doing a lot to block scam calls, some $1.9 billion scam calls blocked up to the end of March 2024, 533 million scam texts blocked up until the same period. I commend Ministers Rowland and Jones for the work that they're doing on this. The Albanese government understands that this pernicious criminal behaviour is costing Australians time and money, and we are doing all we can in order to put an end to scams in our community.
Thank you. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Cunningham.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today is National Financial Awareness Day, an important day dedicated to promoting financial literacy and security. One of the biggest challenges posed to Australians' financial security today is the rise of SMS impersonation scams. The Telecommunications Amendment, SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024, is a crucial step forward in the Albanese Labor government's multi-pronged approach to combating SMS scams. The bill amends the Telecommunications Act 1997 to require ACMA to establish and maintain an SMS Sender ID register. The register will play an important role in combating SMS scams by implementing a framework for the registration and regulation of SMS sender IDs. We are taking decisive action to safeguard Australians against fraudulent activities. Many Australians are far too familiar with these frustrating and often devastating scams. SMS is now the most frequently reported contact method for scams, and almost $27 million was lost to scams in 2023, as reported to ScamWatch. Sadly, the monetary losses in reality are much higher than this amount, as not all people who fall victim to these scams actually report it. This almost $27 million is not just a statistic. It represents the loss of hard-earned savings of many Australians, the reputation of businesses being impersonated, and the security of many people's private information. Through these scams, many individuals may face significant financial losses. This is because people are led to believe that the message they receive are from well-known companies or brands such as banks, government agencies or retailers. The impacts can be equally devastating emotionally, leading to stress, anxiety, feelings of helplessness as people try to process the financial repercussions of falling for these scams. SMS scams have become increasingly complex, using techniques such as phishing and spoofing. Phishing tricks people into giving away sensitive information by pretending to be a trusted entity, while spoofing involves faking a trusted identity to deceive victims, often as part of a phishing attack. Scammers can impersonate banks, government agencies or popular businesses, making it really hard for individuals to distinguish if the message they receive is genuine or fake. In a time when digital communication is rapidly evolving, the threat of SMS impersonation scams has grown significantly. Immediate and decisive action needs to be taken, which is precisely what this bill aims to address. The introduction of the SMS Sender ID Register Bill represents a proactive approach to stop the risks of SMS scams by establishing a thorough framework that is able to confirm the identity of legitimate SMS communications. As mentioned previously, one of the key components of the bill is the requirement for ACMA to establish and maintain a register of legitimate sender IDs. This register acts as a vital tool that will help to verify the legitimacy of SMS senders, which in turn will minimise the fraudulent messages. The bill provides ACMA with the flexibility to either directly manage the register or engage a contracted provider to partially or wholly maintain it. This flexibility will ensure that the register can be efficiently managed by using external expertise to maintain its efficiency and reliability. And it also gives the powers to ACMA to make determinations by legislative instrument. These instruments are crucial for outlining the specific requirements to be able to access and administer the register. It will ensure that the register operates seamlessly and transparently, which will provide a clear pathway for people and businesses to comply with its standards. The instruments will be created with a high attention to detail, ensuring that all operational aspects are in place before the register is implemented. Along with the register, the bill mandates the creation of an industry standard for telecommunications providers managing SMS traffic. This standard will require telcos to verify SMS messages using sender IDs against the register to determine their legitimacy. If a sender ID is found to be unregistered, the telecommunications provider may be obliged to block or tag the SMS as potentially fraudulent. This will act as a critical frontline defence against SMS impersonation scams, which means that only verified communications reach the Australian public. Once the framework is operational, the register will be a reliable platform for legitimate businesses to register their sender IDs. By reducing the frequency and impact of SMS impersonation scams, the register not only protects Australians, but it will also disrupt the bad actors looking to exploit many vulnerable Australians. The Albanese Labor government is not naive in thinking the register will provide a silver bullet against all future SMS impersonation scams. We know that scammers will consistently change tactics and use new methods to contact and trap would-be victims. This is why the bill has inbuilt provisions to allow the government to respond quickly too. The bill provides the Minister for Communications to make determinations in the future by way of legislative instruments, which will help respond to a changing scam landscape. This will allow the Minister to determine future communication services other than SMS and MMS, which may use sender identifications in the future. As technology continues to evolve, new forms of communication services may emerge that could use sender identifications. The Minister will have the power to recognise and include those future services under the regulatory framework. And this will ensure that any emerging technologies, such as messaging applications or other digital communications platforms, are not left unregulated. The Minister will also be able to expand the definition of sender identifications. Currently, sender identifications are typically limited to letters, numbers and symbols. However, technological advancements may include new types of identifiers, such as emojis, images or even biometric markers, which could be incorporated into sender IDs. The Minister will have the authority to determine which of these new elements can be included in sender identifications, allowing for a flexible and adaptive regulatory environment. Lastly, the Minister will also be able to determine additional relevant information for the register. The register currently focuses on accepted sender identifications, but there may be other relevant details that could improve its effectiveness. The Minister will have the discretion to identify and mandate the inclusion of additional information on the register. By giving the Minister this authority, it enables the government to stay ahead of technological trends and potential threats in the digital communication landscape. In February 2023, ACMA conducted targeted consultations with key stakeholders, including telecommunications providers, government agencies, merchants and consumer organisations. After ACMA conducted their consultations, a public consultation took place during February and March of this year to get feedback on whether the register should be mandatory or voluntary. Both of these consultation periods have helped to guide the Minister's decisions about this bill, to ensure the register is both effective and aligned with the needs of the community. ACMA are expected to hold more targeted consultations on draft legislative instruments. This again will help to refine the finer details of the register's processes, ensuring a strong framework that will help to protect the Australian public. In the 2023-24 budget, we committed to providing $86.5 million for the first step of a coordinated, whole-of-government approach to address the rise of scams. Through its Fighting Scams Initiative measure, the Albanese Labor government has committed a further $67.5 million over 4 years from 2024-25 to combat scams and protect Australians from financial harm. My colleague, the member for Whitlam, has played a significant role in helping to combat scams. Under his leadership, the Albanese government has implemented several key initiatives to protect Australians from fraud and scams. He has actively organised and hosted numerous forums across the country, focusing on educating and empowering Australians to stay vigilant against scams. These forums are designed to raise awareness about the evolving tactics used by scammers and to provide practical advice and information on how to protect personal information and finances. We are introducing mandatory industry codes specifically designed to combat scams. Along with this, ACMA will be empowered to enforce compliance with the Telecommunications Industry Anti-Scams Code. This code is a vital tool which requires all telecommunications providers to identify, trace and block phone and SMS scams. These code rules have already produced significant results, with over 1.9 billion scam calls and 533 million scam texts blocked by the end of March 2024. This is a huge achievement and really shows the success of our government's efforts by working with industry partners to combat scams. Last budget, we established the National Anti-Scam Centre, or NASC. This year, the NASC will be launching a national campaign aimed at educating Australians on how to identify and protect themselves from scams. The NASC is housed within the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, or the ACCC, and has been operational since July last year. This centre plays a very important role by helping coordinate national campaigns against scams, providing resources and support to people who have fallen victim to scams, and fostering partnerships with industry and law enforcement agencies. The NASC's educational campaign will be instrumental by raising awareness and to give Australians the knowledge and tools to be able to recognise scams and avoid falling victim to them. Together, these initiatives the Albanese Labor government has implemented, and along with this bill, represent a comprehensive and robust approach to combating scams in Australia. We are firm in our commitment to protecting Australians from financial harm, and we will continue to work tirelessly to ensure that all Australians can live in a secure and trusted digital environment. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Reid.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Scammers are the scum of our society. They are ruining lives and ripping people off. These criminals aren't wearing balaclavas or wielding a crowbar. Instead, they are sitting anonymously behind their computer screens or on the end of a phone line, often in countries far from here. And every one of us in this place will have met a constituent who has lost out extraordinary sums of money to these scammers. And their stories are heartbreaking. As their federal MP, I have been trying to do everything I can to help them get their money back. But in many of these cases, there's very little that can be done for them once the money's been taken. And hearing of people who have lost huge amounts of money because they've clicked through a link or they've answered the desperate calls of someone who they thought was their daughter who was in distress and then sent some money off. It's been so sad to hear about the impact this has had on them. And while scams have been around for a long time, in the last few years, they have gotten more sophisticated and more damaging. As technology has advanced, so too have scammers. And with more and more of our personal and financial information being stored online, this has left more opportunities for theft. And none of us are immune from these scams. The stereotype of someone who would get scammed is often someone who's a bit older and maybe not as digitally savvy. But a 2023 Deloitte survey found that actually it was those in the Gen Z and millennial cohorts who are more likely to be scammed than their grandparents. And scammers have become so sophisticated that they managed to convince a financial advice columnist for a New York magazine to put $50,000 of cash in a box and hand it to a stranger because she thought that person was a CIA agent. This is the level of sophistication that we are now getting to. And the piece that she wrote about her experience went viral online because people were sharing their own stories about how they had been scammed. And we have had similar experiences of people coming to my office, a public school teacher who had been scammed of $50,000, a young man who had been working up to save for a deposit on his first home. He lost the deposit entirely. These are heartbreaking stories. But what are we doing? What is the government doing to help protect citizens against these scams? And this bill is part of a broader suite of measures that the government is working on, designed to crack down on scammers and reduce scamming losses right across our country. And I'm really proud of the work that the Labor government is doing because we have made this a significant priority in helping to protect Australians. Foremost in the government's push has been to establish the National Anti-Scam Centre. This is a unique and really first of its kind centre that takes a proactive approach to fight fraud and scams. It's an innovative partnership that unites government agencies, law enforcement and businesses to deploy cutting-edge technology to block scams right at the source. Importantly, the National Anti-Scam Centre has an education function as well, and that's to empower communities and individuals by raising awareness, providing practical tips to safeguard against scammers. And even the initial findings of the Albanese government's crackdown on scammers has had some promising results. According to the National Anti-Scam Centre's second quarterly report, scam losses in October to December of 2023 have almost halved in comparison to the same period just the year prior. So prior to the Albanese government taking office, annual scam losses in Australia exceeded $3 billion. And that was a quadrupling over 3 years. So the amount that was being taken out of people's pockets, $3 billion, that obviously has a huge impact on their lives. And that problem was growing exponentially before we came into government. Since our government's intervention, this trend has reversed. In the first 6 months of the crackdown, we saw significant reductions, with November 2023 reporting a 50% decrease in losses compared to the previous year. This means that the work that we are doing is having an impact. However, we are still losing too much money. People's lives are still getting damaged by scammers, and that we know that there is a lot more work to do. So what I am doing at the local level is ensuring that my community have a good understanding of what scams look like and how they can protect themselves against being scammed. It was a great morning when we held our seniors morning tea recently, and the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, came along to Burwood Public School to speak to seniors directly about how they can protect themselves and their families from being scammed. And we had about 150 people in the hall that day, and the Assistant Treasurer asked the audience to put their hand up if they had received a scam text, email, or online message. And almost everyone in the audience put their hand up. He then asked if anyone knew of anyone who had been scammed, and still there were people who had their hands up. Everyone in that audience had some interaction with a scammer, and that's the unfortunate state that we currently live in. But it's not just individuals and families who are vulnerable to scams, it's also businesses too. And so I invited Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill to join a small business forum that I held, along with Realise Business, who had an expert cyber security speaker there, to help inform small businesses about how they can protect themselves and their customers from being scammed and from hacks. Because we want to make sure that we do everything we can to reduce the losses of scams and make sure that individuals, families and small businesses are not vulnerable to these criminal activities. And it's important to make sure that we minimise the avenues for scammers to approach our community via SMS and MMS as well as online. And according to the department, SMS is now the most frequently reported contact method for scams. As the Fighting Scams consultation paper has noted, we've all become accustomed to receiving SMS from businesses and organisations that we trust. It's estimated that $27 million was lost in scams in 2023 alone, but this figure is likely to be an underestimation as many scams go unreported. That's why in April 2023, the government announced the establishment of an SMS sender register alongside the creation of the National Anti-Scam Centre that sits within the ACCC. These measures were complemented by rules introduced by the Australian Communications and Media Authority, which required companies to block scam text messages. And we know that even during the period from July and December 2022, telcos blocked more than 90 million scam texts. That's 90 million scam texts. We were getting these multiple times a day. So this government knows that we have to keep building on protections for our community. And this is what this bill does. The establishment of the SMS Send Register is designed to fundamentally undermine the business model of SMS scammers. It will help to prevent scammers from impersonating brands and organisations and will start to restore public confidence in SMS as a communications channel. Under a potentially mandatory model, all organisations sending text messages with letter-based sender IDs to Australian mobile phones would need to register these IDs. This would apply to both Australian and overseas senders. Phone companies would also have to follow up new regulations which would require them to either block messages from unregistered senders or add a warning label to these messages saying they might be scams. For the person receiving the SMS, this would prevent people from receiving SMS from scammers claiming to be a particular company or organisation. It would allow receivers of SMS to trust that when a text message says it's from the ATO, that it is actually from the ATO. And where an entity is not registered, it would require the telcos to send a scam warning alongside it. So there's more work for us to do, but we've already started the really important work of helping to safeguard our community from these scammers. And education is the big piece here, to ensure that individuals are not susceptible to falling prey to these scammers. I'm going to continue to hold anti-scam forums across my community to help individuals and small businesses keep on the lookout for these scam messages. And if there's anything that I could leave the community with, it's that there are 3 simple things you can do to help protect yourself. One is to ensure that you have a complicated password by trying to use a passphrase instead of a password. The other is to ensure that you have 2-factor authentication, and you can set that up to ensure that it is much harder for scammers to access your banking or financial details. And the other is to check if someone were to send you an email or an SMS, instead of clicking through to the link, call the organisation or institution that is trying to get in contact with you. And in the words of Lillian, who came to my seniors' morning tea, where Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones was speaking about the problem of scams, the one thing that she took out of that anti-scam forum is do not click on the blue link in that email or SMS. So in the words of Lillian, keep that in mind. Do not click on the blue link.
Thank you. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Holt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today as the federal member for Holt to speak on the Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024. This is a crucial piece of legislation aimed at protecting Australians from the pervasive threat of SMS scams. This bill represents a vital step in our broader strategy to combat scams, specifically targeting SMS fraud, where scammers send messages that appear to be from well-known brands such as banks, government agencies, or retailers. In recent years, we have been bombarded by a burst of texts from individuals posing as reputable organisations. These might include a text from Australia Post requesting payment for a small custom fee, or a message from Linked claiming you have an outstanding toll invoice, even if you haven't driven on a toll road. These scams are not only financially devastating, but also causing significant psychological distress and erode trust in digital communications. This bill will establish an SMS Sender ID Register managed by the Australian Communications and Media Authority. By creating a register of sender IDs, we aim to protect consumers from being deceived and safeguard the reputation of legitimate brands and agencies. The scope of the problem we are addressing is immense. In 2023 alone, almost $27 million was lost to SMS scams reported to ScamWatch. The actual losses are likely much higher, as not all scams are reported. It is difficult to imagine an Australian who hasn't received one of these fraudulent text messages claimed to be from a bank or a toll road operator aiming to steal their money or personal information. Over the past year, significant progress has been made by the government. Data released by the ACCC in April 2024 indicates that estimated scam losses were down 13.1% in 2023 compared to 2022. This reduction is encouraging, but we acknowledge that Australians are still losing too much to scammers. There is no silver bullet to eliminate scam activity. Scammers will inevitably adapt and employ new methods to target victims. The formal creation of this register will bolster our existing anti-scam measures. Once operational, this register will reduce the frequency and impact of SMS impersonation scams on Australians, restore confidence in SMS as a communication channel, and ultimately make Australia a harder target for scam activity. A pilot register has been operational since last year, generating valuable insights that have informed this bill. Deputy Speaker, this bill is the next formal step in creating an SMS sender ID register, which, once fully operational, will offer better protection for consumers and enhance brand protection for legitimate businesses and entities using SMS sender IDs. The main elements of this bill are as follows: a requirement for the ACMA or a contracted service provider to establish and maintain the register, a two-step registration process specifying how entities may apply to the ACMA for approval to register one or more sender IDs, provisions for a deferred commencement date to allow ACMA time to finalise the technical and operational aspects of the register, authority for the Minister for Communications to determine, by legislative instrument, other communication services that may use sender IDs in the future, hybrid decision-making where decisions based on objective criteria can be made by computer programs, while decisions requiring evaluative judgments are made by humans. It is important to understand the broader context in which this bill is being introduced. The SMS Sender ID Register Bill is a crucial component of the Albanese Labor government's approach to combating scams. The establishment of the register complements rules registered by the ACMA in 2022, which successfully blocked more than 533 million scam texts between July 2022 and March 2024. This bill is also a part of the broader agenda to combat scams, including the establishment of the National Anti-Scam Centre, a world-leading partnership between government and industry designed to disrupt and stop scammers in Australia. Additionally, the introduction of a scams code framework requires telcos, banks, and digital platforms to prevent, detect, and disrupt scams. The scams targeted by this bill are particularly done because they involve fake text messages that appear to come from trusted sources. These SMS scams use a sender identification, sender ID, in the message headed that looks like that of a well-known company or brand. Unfortunately, people receiving this SMS impersonation scams are often tricked into responding or taking actions against suggested by these text messages, leading to the theft of personal information or money. The establishment of the SMS Sender ID Register will require the ACMA to establish and maintain a register of legitimate sender IDs. The bill confers powers on the ACMA to make a determination setting out further requirements for access to the register and its administration and operation. The ACMA will also create an industry standard for telecommunications providers who manage SMS services. This standard will require telcos to check whether a sender ID is on the register and whether the sender is the registered party. If not, the telco could be required to block or tag the SMS as fraudulent. Once the framework for the register is fully established, businesses and entities will be invited to apply to have their sender IDs placed on the register. Whether the register will be voluntary or mandatory, it is yet to be determined and is not the focus of this bill. Following that decision, rules will be made to bind relevant parties of the industry. This mechanism is not a feature in the bill and will be addressed by existing powers in the Telecommunications Act of 1997. The deferred start date for this Act will accommodate the fact that there are details still under consultation. The register will need to deploy a complex IT system capable of interacting with current systems used by telecommunications industry, and it will need robust privacy and security setting. The bill provides for a hybrid decision-making process, allowing some automated decision-making through the use of computer programs, while decisions requiring evaluating judgment will be made by humans. The bill includes measures to reduce the risk of automated decision-making, such as oversight by the ACMA, and the ability to substitute any incorrect decisions made by a computer program. This bill is testament to our commitment to protecting Australians from the ever-evolving threats of scams. It is a crucial measure that will enhance our anti-scam framework, protect consumers, and restore trust in digital communications. We know that scammers will try different tactics and use new methods to contact victims. This is why the bill includes provisions for the Minister for Communications to make decisions that respond quickly to changing scam landscapes. The development of this bill has been informed by 2 rounds of stakeholder and public consultations. The ACMA initially undertook targeted consultation in February of 2023 with key stakeholders including telecommunication providers, government agencies, merchants and consumer organisations to examine support for the establishment of a register. This broad public consultation was undertaken in February and March of 2024. It is expected that the ACMA will undertake further targeted consultation on draft legislative instruments required to settle the finer details of the registered processes. This builds on the government's previous work in combating scams. Through its Fighting Scams initiative, the Albanese Labor government has committed a further $67.5 million over 4 years from 2024 to 2025 to combat scams and protect Australians from financial harm. This funding will support additional measures, including the introduction of mandatory industry codes to combat scams and campaign by the National Anti-Scam Centre to help Australians identify and protect themselves from scams. The funding provided in the May budget is in addition to the $86.5 million over 4 years allocated in May 2023 budget, which included funding to establish the National Anti-Scam Centre in the ACCC from July 2023. The telecommunications industry anti-scam code requires all telecommunication providers to identify, trace and block phone and SMS scams. These code rules have resulted in over 1.9 billion scam calls and 533 million scam texts being blocked by the end of March 2024. Deputy Speaker, the Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024 is the next step in our commitment to protecting Australians from the ever-evolving threat of scams. It is a crucial measure that will enhance our anti-scam framework, protect consumers and restore trust in the digital communications. I urge my colleagues in this House to support this legislation. I commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the bill now be read a second time. and I call the member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today I rise to speak to the Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024. This bill seeks to bolster the security of our communication channels by establishing an SMS Sender ID Register. The primary goal of this register is to combat impersonation and the subsequent fraud that arises from that impersonation. Bad actors often spoof industry and government brand names in messages, leading to financial losses for businesses and for individuals, sometimes at life-altering levels. I'm aware of HSBC customers, including a number in my electorate, who have been targeted by a sophisticated bank impersonation scam since at least April 2023. I've heard from a significant number of constituents whose lives have been irrevocably altered by the tragic financial losses that they have suffered as a result of this disgraceful situation. One received a phone call from a scammer who claimed to work for the HSBC's fraud team. The scammer sent messages which appeared to be from HSBC because they appeared on the same text thread as previous messages that that constituent had received from their bank. Who wouldn't fall for this scam? Ultimately, that scam took control of the account. The scammer stole almost $50,000 from my constituent. I've spoken of this issue before in the House and it bears repeating. Scammers prey on people who are trying to do the right thing. People can lose their life savings through no fault of their own. The cost of fraudulent SMS activity in Australia in 2023 was about $27 million. This bill should go some way to curbing those losses. Under the bill, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, or ACMA, or a nominated third party, will create and maintain the register. It will cover short messaging services, SMS or texts, and multimedia message services, MMS. The bill also anticipates the inclusion of future message services. It needs to be established as soon as is practical. This register will serve as a repository for legitimate sender identifications. That is, that it will enable legitimate services to be identified as thus. The bill defines sender identification to prevent misuse. ACMA will have the power to accept or reject registrations and to deregister users. I'm really pleased to see that the register has been funded by the government at $10.9 million over 4 years, with an ongoing budget of $2.2 million. This is a very small investment in the safety of our citizens, many of whom have lost huge amounts of money. The next critical step in stopping scammers will be in determining whether or not SMS sender identification is voluntary or mandatory. There's pros and cons to both, but I note that 89% of respondents who were involved in consultation around this bill were in favour of a mandatory register, as am I. Under that model, ACMA will identify legitimate senders and it will enforce compliance. In a voluntary scheme, senders could choose to register, but it would be for the telecommunication companies, the telcos, to verify user legitimacy. It's clear that a voluntary scheme could place more risk and more cost on the telecommunications companies. ACMA plans to undertake a cost analysis for both models. The implementation and running costs may fall entirely on the Commonwealth unless ACMA designates telcos as third-party agents. ACMA could perhaps consider a hybrid model in which industry and the Commonwealth share the operating and developmental costs of the register. And I do know that there was a precedent for this sort of model in the late 1990s. Deputy Speaker, industry taking the lead in determining the legitimate senders within our telco system could benefit the public in many ways. It could reduce the burden on public funds of the sorts of disgraceful losses that we've seen as a result of the activities of these terrible scammers. It could enable more timely intervention at the point of sale, and it could well lighten ACMA's regulatory burden by freeing up resources. The government's efforts to tackle scammers are encouraging, but we still need to do more to strengthen our systems and to resist the growing levels of organised crime behind scams. I reiterate my call for a mandatory SMS sender identification register, and I look forward to the completion of the ACMA analysis into the costs of that model. I look forward to clarification of the government's plans at the time of the third reading of this bill.
Thank you. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Spence.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise today to speak in support of the Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024. The humble text message, the SMS or short messaging service, was developed long before the wide proliferation of mobile phones in the pockets, or was more likely the case decades ago in the cars of the majority of Australians. Despite this, the SMS message has remained part of the core functions of mobile services to this very day, surviving well into the age of smartphone, an age where our lives are all increasingly intertwined with digital communication. And in this current age, the trusty text message unfortunately may not be as trustworthy as some may believe it to be. Any medium of technology that connects people together opens up the possibility of bad actors exploiting it for the purposes of anything from identity theft to financial fraud through any number of scams ranging in levels of sophistication. Many have, it seems, placed a little too much trust in this means of communication, with the cost of that trust being an expensive one for many Australians and indeed throughout the world. The Albanese Labor government is committed to enacting measures to protect Australians of all walks of life, across all domains, with one of those domains now being that small screen we all carry around with us every walking moment. The SMS Sender ID Register is a practical and crucial step to protecting Australians from escalating threat of SMS scams. This bill is not an isolated measure, but part of a broader strategy by the Albanese Labor government to enhance digital security across the nation. It complements other initiatives, such as the recent enhancements to cybersecurity frameworks and efforts to improve data privacy. This complements the establishment of the recent National Anti-Scam Centre by our government. And this is because our government knows, just like many of Australia's largest companies and telecommunications providers, that the cost to Australians falling victim to these scammers aren't purely economic in nature. Many of these victims, particularly those who are older Australians or with a culturally and linguistically diverse background, for example, would also suffer further costs by way of loss in their level of trust and faith when using technology and digital communications. Whether that be to stay connected with their families, their peers, to stay engaged with their community and the outside world, and to engage with business and government agencies. Many feeling helpless with using newer forms of technology to begin with, and in the event they realise they have been scammed, when it is already too late, many feel too ashamed to contact authorities to speak with their families about what happened. This is another reason why, when we hear the statistics and figures relating to scams perpetrated against Australians, the volume of economic costs caused are to a degree always going to be understated. Many would, in conceding defeat or still in a state of confusion and bewilderment over what happened, would not easily speak up about what has happened to them, known to be a victim only to themselves and the malicious individuals who preyed upon them, suffering in silence, and sometimes tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars worse off, showing a public face to friends and family of strength, going without to keep up the appearance of things being business as usual. These things can start so what would appear to the untrained eye quite innocently, but most Australians aren't targeted by these kinds of scams in a direct way. This is happening at a grand scale. With text messaging scams, they can appear simplistic. To many of us, they are an occasional nuisance, but they have grown to become significantly more sophisticated. Scammers have adapted their tactics, using methods such as number spoofing to impersonate legitimate businesses and deceive unsuspecting Australians. Going through some blocked messages the other night, and it was quite easy to find a number that looked quite legible, intelligible, and perhaps to 1 in every 1,000 or so individuals who receive this message, legitimate. First, we have one starting off with CommBank security. Your account has a suspicious transaction. Next, we have AusPost. There is an issue with your parcel. Now, for the one that isn't about a delivery or banking, you're about to miss a deadline on your toll payment. You can fix this here. All of them being followed with a shortened link that could lead to anything from malicious spyware attempting to install on my device or being sent through to a relatively similar website to who they claim to be. It's interesting because I don't bank with CommBank. I very rarely have parcels delivered to my home, and in South Australia we don't have any tollways. So it is easy if you are subjected to that this could happen. Further, I had a message the other day on my On my personal device, someone proclaiming to be my daughter. "Hi Dad, I dropped my phone. Can you text me your number?" Well, how did you get my number to be able to text me a message like that? That's how easy it is for us to have a lapse in judgment and hit that link or send that message and confirm the connection. With the website asking me to log in and potentially end up entering in personal information, the financial details that could lead to my identity being stolen or my bank account being drained. Only after seeing my account emptied would I then realise that maybe that error message that popped up advising me to transfer funds through to a secure account maybe wasn't that secure and maybe wasn't that real to begin with. But by that time, the money is long gone. The trail is relatively cold, and often humiliating process of coming to terms with what happened runs parallel to an individual reaching out to agencies, insurers, banks, trying to make it right again and pick up the pieces. Many people lose their rainy day money or even their life savings, everything, sometimes just to a digital portal, rather than to any slick social engineering to close the deal on an unsuspecting mark. If I had clicked on the link, who knows what would have happened, but in the wake of such an experience, I would assume that most, if not all text messages popping up on my phone were fraudulent, and many end up significantly disconnected from societal participation as a result. Whether it be something as innocuous as a friend or family member sending you a text, how can you be sure? The scammer said they were the bank. It said at the top of the message after all. Many services that we use every day also use text messages to communicate with us. It could be a doctor's surgery reminding me of an upcoming appointment and they want me to confirm my time with them. It could be a company or even a government agency sending me an SMS with a code as part of a two-factor authentication, which is, after all, the way we sign into our parliamentary expenses management system. But how could I be sure that the code I'm getting from the Department of Finance was really them? And this is why the need for measures to address ways of combating the prevalence of this type of scam. Hopefully the process that led to the introduction of this bill acts as an example of how adopting a collaborative approach whereby industry, government, regulatory agencies and law enforcement can work together to restore public trust within society as the common text message. Whilst I had mentioned the National Anti-Scam Centre earlier on, it provided me, through their website, a very sobering picture of the state of play with scams in Australia. Across the 2023-24 financial year alone, Australians reported a loss of over $326 million to scams between roughly 288,000 reports. SMS scams in that time cost Australians $18 million, although the percentage of financial loss wasn't as high as other medium scammers can utilise. SMS scams did comprise 36% of total reported incidents during that financial year. With the three biggest methods of attack being investment scams, phishing scams and then romance scams, close to 51% of all reported SMS scams losses were incurred by individuals that were either 55 years or older. Doing nothing or merely having educational or awareness campaigns as a sole method of combating these incidents. Though I am sure a number of my constituents who have received one from my office are just as grateful to have a copy of the little black book of scams that is published by the ACCC. Having this level of awareness in the community about scams is important, but having a mechanism that will prevent and deter SMS scams that is backed by telcos, large institutional companies and government is something that was called for, and thus the journey to the establishment of the SMS sender ID registration began in earnest. The SMS sender ID register will require businesses to register their sender IDs with the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA. This process will create a safeguard against fraudsters who attempt to impersonate legitimate entities. Businesses will submit their sender IDs and associated details to a centralised database by ACMA, ensuring that these IDs are protected from unauthorised use. Think of the SMS sender ID register as a digital shield, fortified, resilient and ever vigilant, protecting Australians from the king tide of fraudulent messages. This shield must be both flexible and scalable, capable of adapting to future technological advancements while handling a large volume of sender IDs. ACMA's role in the process is critical. The authority will verify and authenticate sender IDs by cross-referencing businesses' details with existing records to ensure legitimacy. The system will employ technical safeguards to prevent duplication or misuse of registered IDs. maintaining the integrity of this registry. This, alongside the continuous monitoring of SMS traffic, will allow ACMA to detect and respond to violations, such as issuing fines and suspending sender ID privileges when necessary. The development and implementation of this bill have been supported by key stakeholders across various sectors. Major telecommunication providers such as Optus and TPG recognise the necessity of a mandatory SMS sender ID register. These companies understand that maintaining consumer trust is crucial, and they are committed to supporting measures that enhance this trust. The financial sector has also been a strong advocate for this legislation. Banks and financial institutions are on the front lines of the battle against scams, witnessing firsthand the devastating impact these scams can have on their customers. Institutions such as Bendigo Bank and Adelaide Bank and NAB, they have stressed the importance of a centralised enforceable system to combat these sophisticated scams. Their backing, along with the telecommunications companies, greatly improves the SMS sender ID register's potential to protect customers and preserve the integrity of the financial system. Quotes from industry leaders reflect the widespread support of this initiative. As one industry leader put it, the SMS sender ID register is a crucial step forward in protecting our customers from the sophisticated scams that threaten their financial security every day. We fully support this initiative and look forward to working with the government to ensure its success. Such endorsements highlight the importance of this legislation and the collaborative effort required to make it effective. Small businesses, often disproportionately affected by scams due to limited resources, will also benefit significantly from this legislation. The strength of this bill lies in its collaborative development. By engaging with a wide range of stakeholders, we have crafted a framework that addresses the immediate threat posed by SMS scams, while considering the needs and concerns of all affected parties. The feedback received from stakeholders highlighted the importance of mandatory register as opposed to a voluntary one. A mandatory register ensures that all SMS service providers participate in the system, creating a comprehensive and effective safeguard against scams. Stakeholders also emphasised the need for robust verification processes to prevent misuse of the register, and the bill reflects these recommendations by incorporating stringent identity checks for all registrants. This bill is a definite step in the right direction, and the collaborative nature of combat fraudulent activities through to finding the best mechanism, which, given where we are today, this proposed SMS ID register was considered the best fit to do so, should act as a litmus test for solutions to combating the many other nefarious mediums which individuals attempt to defraud everyday Australians. As scammers and other fraudulent and malicious actors out there, both at home and abroad, adapt and get smarter and more sophisticated with the manners and methodology of how they prey upon ordinary Australians, then so too must we. This is why the Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024 represents a vital step forward in safeguarding Australians from the ever-growing threat of SMS scams. By establishing this register, we are closing the door on scammers who seek to exploit our telecommunications networks. Together, government, industry, law enforcement and every Australian, we can build a safer, more secure digital future. I commend this bill to the House, and on an aside, to all members who haven't picked up a copy of the ACCC's Little Black Book of Scams, I'd highly recommend you do so. It is a great tool that many of our constituents would thank us for having available to them at our offices. Thank the House.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to make my contribution to the Telecommunications Amendment SMS Sender ID Register Bill 2024. In the past few years, we have seen a significant increase in scams as well as increased focus on how to better combat them. They have touched the lives of every Australian. Everyone knows someone who's been scammed or has been scammed themselves, and these come in all shapes and forms. It could be by email, SMS, phone calls, social media, or even as a knock on the door. At least once a day, Australians are confronted by scams in some form, and the most common types are those through SMS and phone calls. Australians often get a call from an unknown number or a misspelt text message claiming to be from a major company. And this presents a significant issue, as phone calls and text messages are often the only way to contact companies, and we are often waiting for messages and phone calls with them. While some are more obvious than others, it can really be difficult to discern what is real and what is fake. Only recently, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, reported a rise in SMS scams impersonating companies like Coles, Telstra, Optus, Woolies, and relating to loyalty and reward points. Of course, there are by no means unique or unfamiliar to Australians. In 2024, over 95,000 scams were reported to the National Anti-Scam Centre's Scam Watch. And since new rules were implemented in 2022 by ACMA, more than 533 million scam texts between July 22 and March 24 had been blocked, helping to stop those scams before they reached Australians. The introduction of this bill marks the next step in the Albanese government's ongoing effort to protect Australians from scams. It builds on the government's commitment to a further $67.5 million over 4 years to combat scams, this will support the introduction of mandatory industry codes to combat scams, the ACMA work in enforcing compliance with Telco Industry Anti-Scams Code, and a campaign by the National Anti-Scam Centre, which was established on the 1st of July 2023, on how Australians can identify and protect themselves for scams. This funding is in addition to the $86.5 million over 4 years provided in the May 23 budget, which included funding to establish the National Anti-Scam Centre. And Deputy Speaker, already our efforts have helped combat scams, with recent data indicating scam losses have declined 13.1% in 23 from 2022. This bill, once passed, will require ACMA to establish and maintain an SMS sender register, delivering on our April 23 announcement to establish the register. The bill has been informed by two tranches of stakeholder and public consultation by ACMA and the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts, gathering feedback from telecommunications providers, government agencies, merchants, consumer organisations and the public. The register, once established, will play a crucial role in fighting against SMS scams by helping Australians better identify and differentiate between legitimate business and scams. Scams that will be targeted by this register are those text messages that are sent using a sender ID in the message header, which looks similar to well-known companies that Australians may interact with daily. There are an estimate 300,000 legitimate sender IDs in use in Australia, which could potentially be registered, and this legislation lays this groundwork necessary for that registration. Explicitly embedded in this bill are essential elements for applications, the refusal of applications and the removals of entities from the register. ACMA will be tasked with setting out further requirements for access to the register, its administration and operation before the register commences. ACMA will establish an industry code for telecommunication providers who manage SMS traffic, requiring telcos who manage that traffic to check if an SMS using a sender ID is on the register, and if not, the telco will be required to block or tag the SMS as potentially fraudulent. To ensure that ACMA have the appropriate time to develop further requirements for the access to the register, establish the industry code and procure the necessary ICT platforms to establish the register, the bill allows for deferred commencement date. The deferred commencement date will accommodate the decision that will be made later this year on whether the register will be voluntary or mandatory. To allow for the time needed by ACMA to finalise these preparations, the bill provides ACMA must establish the register as soon as practicable, allowing the necessary flexibility to prepare for the commencement of the registrar. It is expected it will be operational by late 2025, and once fully operational will make Australia a harder target for scam activity. Of course, the Albanese government does not think the register will be a silver bullet against SMS scams, and we know that scammers will continue to employ new methods, which is why provisions in this bill allow the government to respond quickly in the face of these growing threats. The bill will allow the Minister to determine future communication services other than SMS and MMS, which may use sender identifications, something other than letters, numbers and symbols, which may be included in sender identifications and relevant information additional to be accepted sender identifications that should be kept on the register. Deputy Speaker, since 2022, the Albanese government has taken a multi-pronged approach to combating scams, and as a result, we've seen the amount of Australians losing scams to reducing. But the number is still far too high, and our government will continue to fight the scammers, and this bill is the next step in our plan to help protect Australians. I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Telecommunications Act 1997 and for related purposes.
If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I'll put the report question immediately. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, and I call the clerk.
Government Business Order of the Day number 2, Customs Amendment Strengthening and Modernising Licensing and Other Measures Bill 2024, resumption of debate on the second reading.
I understand that it is the wish of the Federation Chamber to debate this order of the day concurrently with the Customs Licensing Charges Amendment Bill 2024. There being no objection, the Chair will allow that course to be followed. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the Minister.
Thanks, Speaker. The Customs Amendment Strengthening and Modernising Licensing and Other Measures Bill and the Customs Licensing Charges Amendment Bill form the next steps in the Albanese Government's Simplified Trade System agenda, delivering a simpler, more effective and sustainable cross-border trade environment for Australia. We all know that Australia is a trading nation. Much of our commerce and our economic growth is related to trade through international borders, and it's important that we ensure that the system operates to effectively and efficiently deliver those goods and services to Australia, but at the same time maintain the integrity and protect our borders as well. And this bill ensures that we achieve that objective. The Customs Amendment Bill amends the Customs Act and the AUSCHECT Act to modernise and align customs processes and strengthen compliance with customs licensing. The Customs Licensing Charges Amendment Bill amends the Customs Licensing Charges Act to incorporate amendments to modernise, streamline and strengthen the calculation of depot licensing charges. The bills, Speaker, represent sensible and overdue steps to modernise Australia's customs processes, and they come about as a result of a review of customs licensing regimes that was undertaken many years ago. That review reported on the 31st of March 2017, so it's taken some time to get these reforms to the Parliament, and they are long overdue. But many of these reforms will save Australian businesses time and money and reduce the regulatory burden associated with certain customs processes. The amendments in the bills modernise customs licensing administration by allowing electronic communication methods and streamlining licence fee processes. The amendments also align payment requirements between custom licence types and streamline administration across depot, warehouse and broker licences. The legislation also strengthens the customs licensing regime against threats of criminal infiltration and bolster the efforts of the Australian Border Force to ensure integrity in our supply chains. This includes uplifting entry requirements to be eligible to hold a licence and enhanced fit and proper person checks for licensed entities. Finally, the Customs Amendment Bill makes consequential amendments to the AUSCHECT Act to, among other things, permit the disclosure of information to an officer of customs for purposes under the Customs Act. The legislation will enhance the integrity of Australia's borders, which is vital for a prosperous, secure and safe Australia. The Australian Border Force will continue to consult and support businesses with their transition to these new changes. And I want to thank all members who participated in the debate, and I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. All those of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Customs Act 1901 and for related purposes.
If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I will put the report question immediately. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, and I call the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 3, Customs Licensing Charges Amendment Bill 2024, resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Customs Licensing Charges Act 1997 and for related purposes.
If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I will put the report question immediately. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, and I call the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 4, 2024-2025 budget papers, resumption of debate on the motion to take note of the documents.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Melbourne.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. People are being robbed at the supermarket checkout, and Labor couldn't care less. Paying more than $100 for a basic grocery shop is daylight robbery. Yet families around the country are being forced to do this every day. Coles and Woolworths are ripping people off at the checkout, and Labor won't do anything about it. Coles and Woolies are raking in more than $1 billion of profit during a cost of living crisis, and Labor won't do anything about it. Households are being forced to choose between putting food on the table and paying the rent, and Labor won't do anything about it. Buying fruit, some veggies, eggs, cheese, bread, milk, even toilet paper, these should be treated as essential items, not a luxury. Yet because Coles and Woolworths keep price gouging with absolutely no consequence, they're becoming harder and harder to afford. We need to break up the supermarket duopoly, and we need to make price gouging illegal. Labor has the power to do this today, but is choosing not to. No one should have to tap their card at the checkout and worry if they have enough money to cover the shop that day. By putting big Coles and Woolworths supermarket duopoly on notice that they could be broken up and ending price gouging and making it illegal, we can bring down the cost of living and make groceries cheaper for everyone. The only thing standing in the way of that right now is the Labor Party. This has reached crisis point in this country. Woolworths made $1.6 billion in profit in its most recent annual results. Coles made $1.1 billion in profit in its most recent annual results. And what does the Prime Minister do? Dresses himself up in a Coles vest and goes and plays Coles cosplay while everyone else is struggling to afford the groceries at the checkout and wondering whether their card is going to be bounced and whether they've got enough money to pay for the basics to stay alive. People are skipping meals in order to pay rent and their mortgages. Rents on average have gone up $100 since this government came to power. Mortgages about double that. And meanwhile, and as a result, you're seeing 3.7 million families, it's reported today, struggling with food insecurity in this country because the massive cost of living pressures that are coming everywhere are being felt by people in many places and especially at the checkout. And meanwhile, what happens? Coles and Woolies make billions of dollars in profit. The Prime Minister goes and embraces them and hugs them and does press conferences with them in their uniforms. And meanwhile, at that very same Coles supermarket that day, there's someone who's choosing whether or not they can put that $20 a kilo cheese or milk or bread into their supermarket trolley because they're worried they're not going to have enough money to be able to afford it. And food services are telling us that they're seeing people that they've never seen before, people who've got jobs, people who've got stable accommodation coming up asking for help because the cost of everything is going up so much. Well, what is driving the inflation crisis in this country? It's not everyday people who are struggling to make ends meet, to have enough money to pay food and rent. It's the massive profiteering by these big corporations that are making record profits. Right? The money's not finding its way to the farmers or the producers of the food. It's going straight to the owners of these big corporations who are making massive profits off the back of price gouging and profiteering in the middle of a crisis. And Labor's response to inflation is to ask everyday people to bear the costs through higher interest rates and higher rents. Well, that is using everyday people as cannon fodder in the war on inflation, leaving the RBA to go and lift up interest rates and keep pushing them up and up and up to the point where the housing crisis breaks people. And instead, Labor keeps allowing these big corporations to profiteer and price gouge and put everyday people further into pain. Well, there's an alternative way of tackling this massive cost of living crisis that we've got. That is to make these big corporations start paying tax, to step in and stop the price gouging and make the price gouging illegal, and to use the money that we raise from making these big corporations and billionaires pay tax to make everyday people's lives better by doing things like putting dental into Medicare or making childcare free. That's how you tackle the inflation and the cost of living and the inequality crisis without throwing everyday people to the wolves in the way that Labor is doing at the moment. But it requires guts. It means the Prime Minister has to stop donning Coles vests and instead take on Coles and Woolworths, make them stop price gouging, make price gouging illegal. And instead of sidling up to the big corporations and the billionaires and going to their birthday parties and their lavish anniversary functions, start making the big corporations and billionaires pay tax and use that money to make everyday people's lives better. And use the power of government to step in and stop rents soaring to the point where no one can afford them, to stop the price gouging that's fueling these massive profits of Coles and Woolworths, to stop the banks making billions of dollars of profits off the back of high mortgage rates for everyday people that they are struggling to afford. But a government has to step in and stop letting these big corporations off the hook because it is breaking people. Housing in this country is rigged. It's rigged. It's no longer just a housing crisis, but a housing catastrophe. And yet Labor cannot even bring themselves to say the words housing crisis or rental crisis. They won't help renters. They make mortgage holders pay more and more, and they give wealthy property investors an unfair advantage over first home buyers when it comes to buying a home. And when 75% of all Labor MPs, including the Prime Minister himself, are landlords, you understand what's going on. How's that for self-interest, straight after giving themselves a $4,500 a year tax cut? If you can't buy at the moment, then you have to rent. But with rents skyrocketing out of control, people are choosing between paying rent and putting food on the table, or they end up sleeping in their cars and in tents because they can't find an affordable rental. And all the while, Labor gloats about a surplus. And meanwhile, back in Victoria, we've got Labor selling off land earmarked for public housing to the highest bid to property developers. 120,000 Victorians on the public housing waiting list in the midst of the worst housing crisis we've seen, and yet they're lining their pockets rather than building homes for people. It is disgraceful. Just like the classic landlord special of painting over the light fitting or the window handle to cut corners, Labor's housing plan does nothing but paint over the cracks without addressing the pressures that are causing the cracks in the first place. If you're sick of this system and you want change, you can't keep voting for the same old two parties and expecting a different result. The Greens are fighting for renters, for mortgage holders, and for people who want to buy their first home. We want to freeze rent increases, give people lower rate mortgages, and make housing more affordable by ending those billions in tax breaks which load the deck in favour of wealthy property investors. Now, we know that this won't happen overnight, but nothing changes if nothing changes. The first step is to vote for someone who will fight for you.
The question is that the documents be noted, and I call the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that there aren't any government speakers on this motion, the Take Note 2024-25 budget papers. It's been left to the Greens leader, the member for Melbourne, and myself to talk about this important topic. And it is an important topic because the budget is the economic framework which determines economic activity, which determines how businesses and household budgets will also be shaped into the future. And there were some sentences in the member for Melbourne speech which would resonate, but the difficulty there is the Greens are not part of the solution. In fact, they are part of the problem. And let me tell you, the Greens want to take this country down a path of social instability, of societal lack of cohesion. And I really worry if the Greens, in fact, get more seats in those inner city suburbs. I've always said the worst Labor member is always going to be better than the best Greens member because the policies that the Greens put forward are just absolutely nutty. Rest assured, and the Greens leader spoke about the duopoly of Coles and Woolworths. I'll just say this, the Nationals and now the Liberals are putting forward a divestiture policy and plan which has some positivity about it. But to be fair, many young people, when they go for their first full-time job in regional areas in particular, often present a curriculum vitae which has stacking shelves and working at checkouts at one of the big supermarkets on it. Coles and Woolworths employ many people, and particularly in regional Australia. And when I was the Small Business Minister, I had the privilege to go to Melbourne to attend a dinner where Coles hosted the small business operators from around the country and handed out awards to the best of those businesses which, but for Coles, and the case is similar with Woolworths too, would not have had the opportunity to put their stock, their goods, their endeavours of their hard work on national supermarket shelves. And they owed it to those supermarkets for that opportunity. And it's all easy when the pile-on is happening to kick hard. And we've seen it with banks, we've seen it now with the big duopoly. I would suggest that people make sure they look at Foodworks and IGA and other independent grocers too when considering where to buy their groceries. But it's true that that groceries are up. The member for Melbourne was right when he said that. In fact, food is up 11%. Since the Albanese government took over in May 2022. It's not just food that has increased. Health costs are up 11%, education up 11%, Housing up 15%, and I listened carefully to the Greens leader's contribution there, and I reiterate, they are part of the problem. In Melbourne, his home state, the Jacinda Allen government doesn't want gas in new homes, doesn't want gas full stop, is trying to ban the logging industry. What are we going to build homes with? It's hard enough to get the metal joists, the metal brackets for homes, often imported, but with the Greens' mad policies of jacking up the price of power and jacking up the price of everything else, I mean, how does a new home buyer get into the market? It's almost impossible. And then we have his offsider, the member for Brisbane, running around, suggesting that it's all the Commonwealth's problem, when in fact a large lot of it has to do with development applications at local government level. A lot of it has to do with social housing, which is the remit, always was, of state governments, and yet the member for Brisbane makes out as if, vote for me, it's going to be all changed because I will change it. And when the Prime Minister dresses him down in Parliament about that very fact, I tend to agree with the leader of the country on that score. Rent is up 15%, financial and insurance up 17% under this Labor government. Electricity, Madam Deputy Speaker, 22% increases since May 2022. And here we had a Prime Minister on no less than 97 occasions prior to being elected saying that he was going to put in place a $275 power cut and that power prices would be less under a Labor government than what was happening under the coalition. It was all a folly. It was just a lure to get votes in a misplaced way, because ask anyone now, are they paying more than what they were under the coalition government? And the resounding answer will be yes, they are. People are poorer. Gas is up 25%. I mean, how do household budgets, how does industry, how do farms, how do factories, how does small business afford such costs, such cost increases? Now, the 2024-25 budget handed down by the member for Rankin, it was an election sweetener, not a very good one. And we see the fact that, no Labor members are coming in to defend it. No Labor members are out there promoting it. I mean, why would they? Why would you promote a dead, stinking cat? Because that's basically what it is. It is not providing hope. It is not providing a future. It is not providing a vision for this country, and certainly not for those people, for those workers that the once proud Labor Party, stood for. No, it's not the case. Regional, rural, and remote Australians, well, they've missed out again. It's only the Liberals and the Nationals who, thanks to the member for Dixon's fantastic budget and reply speech, and not only was it a very good speech on his feet in the floor of Parliament, but his speech later at a function that night was one of the best examples of having a vision for this country from opposition that I've had the privilege of listening to, and I've heard a few. Well, Labor, we know they've stayed true to Labor's ethos. That is, spin and bereft of substance, and particularly for those in rural and regional Australia. I mean, I really, really worry about those irrigation communities, river communities who, I might add, grow the food and the fibre that puts the breakfast, lunch and dinner on our plates and clothes on our backs, not just for this country but many others too. I really worry for those people, those hard-working farmers, because in the budget papers, the amount of money to be spent on water buybacks is marked NFP, not for publication. And that is of a great disturbing element to our farmers, because they know not how much water will be bought out of those communities such as Deniliquin and Griffith and Hillston and Colliambly and Leeton and Narrandera and all the rest. And the concern there is not just for farmers. They'll get the big cheque. The market will be distorted. The price will go up because the Commonwealth enters the water buying. And what happens though is the local hairdresser and the cafe and the schools, they all then suffer because there are less people in that community, and certainly there's less economic activity in those communities. And Labor does it under the guise of, well, we're doing it for the environment. They have taxpayer-funded ads, which screen on the televisions of people who, quite frankly, regional Australia get quite insulted by the fact that they say that they're not good stewards of the environment. That is the inference in these advertisements. And even the tax cuts, even the supposed tax cuts that Labor's putting in. I mean, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, because they're taking on one hand and then giving just a little bit back with the other, and then they call it a tax cut, but they are promoting it via a huge multi-million-dollar tax blast, tax advertisement splurge, and it's not necessary. It is just a waste of money. They'd be better off spending it in regional health, regional education. Goodness knows, if you looked at the NAPLAN figures this morning, with a third of children unable to read or write at an acceptable level, and then you've got a television spruiking Labor's budget. It wasn't a good budget. It simply wasn't a good budget. It was a typical Labor budget. Labor's always about the politics, always about the re-election tactics, never about the outcomes and the people.
The question is that the documents be noted, and I call the member for Pearce.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the debate be adjourned.
And do you move the resumption of the debate to be...
Yes, I do.
Thank you. The question is that the debate be adjourned and the resumption of the debate be made an order of the day for the next sitting. All those of that opinion say aye. Against no. I think the ayes have it. And I call the member for Pearce.
Thank you. I now move. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder?
I second the motion, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. Thursday the 15th of August.
Excellent.